either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast MicroViews. I'm Nicho.
And I'm Chris.
And in our ever-intelligent planning, we didn't realize that Monty Python and the Holy Grail was a slightly religious movie. So now, Fish Called Wanda is a bit out of place in our end of the season religious block that we're doing.
Yeah. Oops.
Yeah. For those who don't know A Fish Called Wanda, because I don't know a lot of people nowadays who would know it.
That's true.
I grew up with this one a little bit, but it's a movie about a diamond heist gone wrong as everyone tries to backstab each other for the loot, except for Ken.
Yeah.
And I quite like Ken.
I do too. No, this movie is, I had heard about this movie. My parents were definitely they were the age demographic, right, for this 1988 slapstick sort of movie. And it's so British. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think because you had you were curious of whether we should cover this one or not.
That's true.
And then I told you the plot, and because we were doing Monty Python and we wanted to do another comedy movie, you said that sounds like the most British movie I've ever heard.
And it is.
It is.
And it's fantastic.
I mean, it's the story's by John Cleese and Charles Crinton, written by John Cleese, directed by Crinton, with Cleese uncredited. It's got John Cleese starring in it.
Of course it does.
Jamie Lee Curtis, Kevin Kline, and Michael Palin.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And there's a bunch of other stars and British people in general that are cameoed in. Like a very young Stephen Fry is in here, and I totally forgot about that till I was watching it. I was like, oh yeah, he's in here. Yeah. Because he's at the bottom of the credits list because he's in for a half a second. And this is when he was young and he hadn't the big name yet. Yeah. So I was like, oh, there's so many people in this that are this is such a surprisingly quaint heist movie. Yeah, well, but it's not meant to be quaint. It just is because it's such again, Monty Python Britishness. It is trying to be silly, it's trying to be slapsticky, and honestly, at times it's trying to be a little bit dark. Yeah, well, but I love it. And that's what's interesting about it too, is because it does start off rather generic. It does. And all of them, like we said, don't trust each other. But I do want to bring up how kind of dumb everyone is. Even Wanda, who, while arguably the smartest of the three thieves on the outside, is only just a bit smarter. We got the American assassin Otto, who's constantly speaking foreign gibberish. That makes me think of the Scary Movie 4, was it? Yeah. Where he's speaking just Would
random
you like
Japanese
to know what
brands.
Do you want to know what he says half the time? It's Italian. He's trying to speak Italian. And I don't know a lot of Italian, but I do know what he's saying. And you know why? Why? It's just words off of a menu. They're all food.
Oh, okay. I wasn't even paying attention. I just started hearing it and caught a couple words. And I'm like, oh, that's just gibberish.
No, it's fully he is just ordering off of a menu. And
it Wanda cracks me up. The menu.
It's a whole running gig because Wanda is so turned on by any foreign language that he's just literally Pole du fromage to her.
Well, and that's where she's only the slightly smartest because she's you don't even speak it. I had to look it up.
Yeah. And honestly, it takes her a long time to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know if it's figured out. She's just kind of playing along with it until that point.
And that's kind of that's honestly the best fun of this movie is everyone in this is so goofy, but they all play along with each other's goofiness because in their heads, they're normal.
Yeah. They're just dumb enough and believable and eccentric enough of characters. They play it how Bryan Cranston brought up in Malcolm in the Middle, that to play that kind of role, you have to take it serious. That's true. That's when comedies work. When you know you're in on the joke, then that's when comedies fail.
And honestly, that's part of the reason. I did watch a few interviews. I know we don't normally do a bunch of research, but I had not seen this movie. It had been advertised to me as a child as Christine, you'd like this movie. I was very against comedy as a kid. I could not do embarrassment. I could not do secondhand embarrassment. And most of our parents' haha funny movies were just embarrassing.
Yeah, because it came off of Seinfeld a little bit.
It definitely did. And so I could not handle any of it, so I skipped a lot of those movies growing up. Despite the fact that, yes, I probably would have liked this movie. I probably could not have gotten around to watching it, though, until now. And so then I went back and I had to do a bunch of research because I was I know Jamie Lee Curtis. She is a huge name now. But this is such a young Jamie Lee Curtis. I was so interested in, where she was in her career and all this sort of stuff. And it really surprised me to learn that she did not, when they first called her for this, she thought they were trying to get a hold of her husband. because she saw the list of who else was starring in this and was like, oh, you don't mean me. You want my husband because you have worked with him before. He's got similar style. I'm not like this at all.
I'm the Scream Queen now turned famous actress.
Yeah, and like she had been doing a lot of much more serious roles, and she like was reading through the like sections that were happening. She's like, I'm not even going to be playing the straight man. Cleese plays the straight man, which is honestly kind of surprising because normally he's the slapstick comedy. Like, he's the one who's being made fun of most of the time. Yeah,
exactly. And just, like, his role in it, like, he is the grounding character, but also he is comedic in his own ways because he's not in on the joke.
And I truly believe that Cleese and then his later success in acting is what makes this movie a version of Quaint. Because you cannot watch this movie and not see him and relate him to all of his other comedy roles that you've seen him in.
Yeah.
And he's playing the straight man here, so it feels more like he's interviewing a bunch of idiots on accident, despite this not being an interview film at all. But, like, it has that same vibe.
And also taking place in a city, too, because normally when you say Quaint, you think of, like, oh, it's a small, quaint village quaint house outside of town.
But it's all very London-y based. Like, it's also filmed in such like a fun way where like multiple times they're like, okay, well, we're going to flatten this dog. This dog is gonna be so dead. And like they originally filmed it and it was bloody. And everyone kind of agreed. They're like, we're gonna tone it back. Yeah. And honestly, the fact that this is a honestly very realistic movie, despite everyone being over the top and silly, the fact that the dog looks like straight out of the Looney Tunes after it got run over, it just makes this movie 10 times better.
Well, and that's because Ken in himself is a Looney Tunes character. The reason dog died, there's 3 dogs that die, and it's all because Ken is obsessed with killing the one observer who can get them basically, or get the guy in jail sentenced, and they'll all go down with him.
Yeah, they can't get the diamonds then.
He's tasked with killing her Otto has bet him £1 that he can't do it. A single pound to kill an old woman, and he can't even do it. He keeps killing the dogs.
And honestly, the part that was like the funniest to me is it's not even like generic dog or even like leaning into a British stereotype dog. They're 3 Yorkies, and if you're a Yorkie person, you know this is true. You can't have just one Yorkie. Yorkie people, much like dachshund owners, have congregations of Yorkies.
Are Yorkies not English?
They are, but not in the same way corgis are.
Oh.
Like they are English, but not a stereotypical haha British. It is more in the same light of like, this man kills 3 Yorkies, one ridiculously after another, instead of killing this very easy to die old woman. Like the actress who played her was like in her 90s during this filming or something like that.
Yeah.
And like, so the majority of her acting is just her kind of gently toddling around.
It's like Clint Eastwood in The Mule, where it's like you watch that movie and it's like, oh, Eastwood, you're showing your 92-year-old self right now. You're toddler, which I mean was good for The Mule, but like you go from like the good, the bad, and the ugly to that.
To him, yeah. No, and it always cracked me up so hard because like she looks so pushable in the movie. She does a great job as like playing up the like surprise every time her poor pet died, like, and it's such like a silly sob. She's just like over in the background like boo-hoo. But like she does a great job, and honestly all of them do such a great job of playing into these characters, and like they're all faces I know very well. They're all actors I know very well, and yet I was really enjoying having the stuttering animal lover or this like supposed demolitions expert.
Oh yeah, we gotta bring it up that Ken isn't wanting to kill the dogs. He feels bad every time, and he goes to the dog's funeral every single time, like and has
like in the background.
The background like Batman,
like James Bond or Batman, where he's just like mourning behind a tree.
Yeah,
like he loves animals to the point where he has like Save the Animals cat poster up in like put up in his flat, and he has like the whole like the name of the story comes from like he is in love with Wanda, but he loves animals so much that he has like these prize fish that are in the fish tank. And as someone who like knows people who are in like, they are into fish. They are into fish tanks. This is the most boring fish tank. These fish are just like ye old standard Petco fish. Yeah. He names one of them Wanda after his unrequited love.
Yeah.
And Like, this man is the most silly, but I love him.
Mm-hmm. Well, and on top of that, I think the reason this movie is as charming as it is because it does start off generic.
Yes.
And then quickly becomes quirky and starts changing your expectations of where is any of this going? Because, I mean, you're not expecting Wanda to really fall in love with the or the barrister is, I think, what they're called. That's
true. But there's a reason it starts off kind of generic. So apparently, Charles and Cleese both grew up and really loved there was like a base in Europe of all of these movies coming out almost yearly, where they were essentially like a heist movie of some kind. Kind of Ocean's 11-y, but like kind of lower budget. And, like, they came out pretty regularly, and it was kind of like, that was the thing. I can't remember the name of the company. I think it was Elling Comedy was the name of the films, but I couldn't find the company. Like, it was one company who made all of them.
Okay.
And so they grew up watching them. I think they had worked in some of them, too. And they're like, we should do that. But, like, make it better. And make it a comedy.
Yeah.
And they started this, and they were like, okay, we're going to make one of those. And we also have 2 scenes that we want in a movie. We just don't know how to get them in the movie. The first scene was, I think it had something to do with the fish, and the other one was them being run over by the steamroller into concrete.
Okay.
Those were the 2 scenes that they were like, we're going to write this into a film, and they're going to use this heist-based, like, platform, like, this heist-based, like, styling that was already, like, well-known and established. We're going to do that, somehow fit these 2 scenes into it. Don't know how yet. We'll just work backwards from there. Mm-hmm. And they did it relatively quickly, too.
Yeah, and how long is this movie? Like an hour and a half, I think? Hour 48, so...
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Yeah. Yeah, knowing that those are like the 2 plot points that they originally put in. Like,
there's so many twists and turns that you honestly could not have told me what they were originally thinking when they wrote this.
Yeah, like when the barristers got Wanda at the flat that he's borrowing the key from, and it's being rented out as an Airbnb that he doesn't know. But it turns out they're the people they bought their house from before they moved out. So.
Yes. Yeah, there's so many silly twists and turns that even when everyone's just honestly sitting around the flat talking about how they're going to get the diamonds back or what they're going to do next, like, even those moments feel, like, exciting and fun. There doesn't feel like a really big lull ever in the movie. There's always something in the background happening.
Oh, yeah. And even then, like, the comedy itself is very dry, very English.
It is.
And even, like, its little snide comments of, like, dumb Americans. They're not the stupidest Americans, but they're pretty dumb.
But everyone in this movie is dumb. And
yeah.
It kind of works.
And also, like, the barristers... love life is really dry. Some life is really dry.
So dry.
They have 2 separate beds still. Like, it's...
She barely looks at him the entire movie.
Yeah, it's poking fun at both sides of the ocean.
It very much is. And part of that was, like, some rather careful editing down. Cleese specifically was like, okay, we're gonna poke fun at both sides, but I don't want this to be too much in favor of any one way, especially because one of the characters, Otto, he's meant to be an Anglophobe. Like, and they wanted it in there. They wanted the humor, but they didn't want this movie to come off as, like, punching at one specific group or the other. They were like, this is just a silly. We'll leave it at that. So they edited that down a bit, but they were like, you know what we're not going to edit down? The dark humor.
Yeah.
We're just going to leave all that in. And at the time when this, like, came out, I think that was a little bit, like, a little more risque than I think a lot of other comedies had been doing at the time. A lot of the rest were a lot more in this slapstick than just, like, adding in that dark humor. And so I honestly really like it. I think it makes it age pretty well. Because, like, it's dark humor, but it's not as dark as we've seen. Like, we've gotten worse, I think.
It's no In Bruges or The Menu.
Not even close. And, like, I honestly do think that, like, having these grittier, a little bit more raw lines and, like, funny moments kind of helps it age a little better, because we're not relying on some slapstick that could age kind of Charlie Chaplin style. We're like, oh, well, it's the period of the time.
Yeah.
This just kind of feels like a comedy that could have still been made today.
No, I completely agree with that. Like, maybe update the jokes a little bit more or make it a little bit more sophisticated.
Sure.
And you've got the workings for it there. And that's the thing is, like, the writing of this movie is so on point as well. Or what seems like a lot of, like, little one-off lines come back, like the woman and her heart condition.
Yeah,
and then that's what ends up killing her instead of Ken actually killing her.
So funny.
Also, like, I love that Otto just happens to have a katana.
Which honestly feels so on brand.
Yeah, but even then, like, there's some really good one-liners that don't come back, or they're just good one-liners, like, Otto's called a Vulgarian, and his response is, "You're the Vulgarian, you fuck."
It's so stupid.
Which makes me think of that line in Bruges where Voldemort smashes the phone and his wife is like, "It's an inanimate object, honey. You're a fucking inanimate object."
It does feel like something I would say, and I love it.
Yeah.
No, and the other thing that makes this movie, I think the pacing work really well, is the majority of this film was shot over only about 70 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of the extras, like shooting that they did, minus a few retakes here and there, was after they had done an initial screening and the audience came through and was like, less of this, more of this, and these people need to have happy endings. And they're like, well, the audience has spoken.
Yeah. Well, and also like the inner fighting between everyone is just so great too.
It
Because
is.
like that ultimately is the climax of the movie, is them just constantly trying to backstab each other.
No, for sure. Because like the actual heist happens within the first minute of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what throws it all off is Ken.
Yes.
Because Otto at some point eats all his fish.
Yeah, well, he's torturing the information out of him.
Yeah.
And I guess the fish he had were rubber fish, and they tasted so bad that he's like said on one of the interviews that he's like, I was ready to eat one of the real fish so I would never have to put that rubber fish back in my mouth.
Yeah, no, it's just such a dumb, like, and it feels like it's a play on those spy horror tropes.
Yes.
Or not spy horror, just spy tropes where like they're tied to a chair for the information.
And, yeah, he's just like fucking with them too. Like the torture scene is like, especially because like I think we've gotten pretty far as showing torture scenes, especially James Bond has like really pushed that envelope and others have then followed. This, I know you, in mainstream, yeah. I know you and I have seen worse.
Martyrs.
Yeah. I think that this one does a good job of towing that like dark comedy line where like, yes, having your very beloved pet fish eaten in front of you, traumatic and also disgusting. Having this guy just fucking with you all day to get this information out of you would probably be traumatic, but they are both the silliest humans that all of this just kind of cancels itself out.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like with Otto's the one who's going between like almost everything, it seems. Yeah. Because as much as Wanda is trying to do her thing, everyone has their own plot, but Otto's so curious about what everyone else is doing that
so nosy.
He ends up screwing everything up for everyone.
He does.
Even himself, because him fucking with Ken leads to him getting caught in cement, and Ken not even caring about the loot at the movie. He's just wanting revenge for his fish Wanda.
Yes. Oh yeah, no, that's the best part. Yeah, the audience fell in love with Wanda despite her being written as honestly one of the more side of the main four. She was not written to like actually fall in love with anyone, but the audience fell for her act so hard that they're like, well, I guess we gotta just, the audience has spoken, and honestly, they're right. Yeah. Well, and so, like, I love that, like, honestly, that gives her more personality. Like, it gives her more of this, like, comedic clown as opposed to being, like, the only competent person on this team.
Yeah, and, like, barely competent.
Oh, well, they're all barely competent.
Competent outside of George.
Okay, yeah.
Who is, like, George is obviously the mastermind.
That's true.
Because he hides the diamond. He knows everyone's going to double cross, so he hides the diamonds somewhere else. He feels
very much like this character who's, like, somehow ended up with these idiots, and now he cannot get rid of them. And no. I love that we don't get to learn about that. I love that this happens like, the heist happens, and then you don't care about the heist almost ever again.
Well, that's what's great about this movie is it's not about the heist at all.
It's all about just these four idiots realizing that they have an opportunity to have all the diamonds.
Yeah, no, exactly. But, and here's, I guess, kind of the moral of the story. Wanda falls in love with the barrister, actually, because he is kind of a good guy, and he's a man who needs to escape from his stuffy life.
His loveless life.
Maybe not loveless, sexless life.
It is definitely sexless.
Which can lead to lack of love. But them having an actual human connection is what gives them basically the reward of the diamonds and life outside of prison, which... According
to the epilogue, it ends with them married in Rio with 17 children and founded a leper colony. So this is another part where the audience during the test screening, they were just going to leave it at Archie and Wanda getting married and just kind of leaving it vague on whether or not Wanda even loved him really, like, or if she was just using him and like continuing to use him. But the audience fell head over heels for Wanda and Jamie Lee Curtis's portrayal of her. They thought she was very convincing. They all were like, no, she deserves a happy ending. You know what? Actually, everyone deserves a happy ending. And so like they added in the epilogue at the end to kind of like appease the audience. And like Cleese talks about how he was like, yeah, the audience, like that overwhelming, like came back. Like almost everyone who saw it in our pre-screening was like, I understand that you've got the dark humor. I need these idiots to all be happy. So that's their happy ending. Ken becomes the master of ceremonies at SeaWorld, and Otto becomes the minister of justice for South Africa.
Okay. I don't know. There's just something charming about this movie in general. It's
so charming. The other thing that I think is charming is like you can tell in the writing that they were really truly having fun. Example being Archie Leach is the barrister's name in the show. That's Cary Grant, the actor's actual name, and they made that distinction very clear because they were like, well, Cleese was like, well, I felt like it was as close as I ever get to actually working with the guy, so
naming the character.
They named the character after him. And like you could, like there is that level of fun and detail sprinkled throughout the whole thing that I think really helps bring it to life, and you can tell that everyone was having a really great time working on it and like being these characters. Jamie Lee Curtis talked a lot about how much fun she had doing this just kind of outlandish thing compared to what she had been working on. And I do think that like this also helps solidify for a lot of people like these, at least in America, like these British actors who like for some of them were well established. Not all of them were like hitting the same levels that they are now.
Yeah, John Cleese I think is probably really, at least from my childhood, the most recognizable one.
He was for sure
because Monty Python, obviously.
Oh, most definitely, but also like I think all of them go on to have such an impact in cinema, and like there are names that are so recognizable, their faces that are so recognizable. And for my parents, I remember a lot of like this movie was what they thought of when they thought of those names or those people. And I don't know if that's true for everyone or if it was just true for them, but like I do remember like this style of comedy, this time period in comedy definitely had a huge impact. And I am a little sad that like as a child I was like, I can't watch this. They're going to eat fish. No.
Yeah. No, this is one of the movies I watched. I wouldn't say too young. I mean, I was probably old enough to start watching these kind of movies. Well, I mean, it's rated R, but I watched it in the American equivalent of elementary school. I was, or end of elementary school. I was in middle school technically at that point, but
it's a pretty relaxed R. It's not trying too hard to hit that R rating.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's very cartoony in a lot of its actions.
It is. There's definitely some more adult topics and scenes, but they're handled in such a comedy light that like, unless your kid is paying super close attention, you get away, I think, with a middle schooler.
A lot of, like, it's in a similar way to Something About Mary or, like, Shallow Hal, where they're technically older movies, but
yeah, like, it's a funny enough time, and, like, it's dated enough that I think a middle schooler could, like, sneak their way around that R rating. Yeah. Depending on the kid, of course.
Yeah, and by today's ratings, it's very tame.
It is.
Yes, Charlie. So, Chris, rent, buy, streamer, decline that we ever watched it despite having an audio recording of us watching A Fish Called Wanda.
I'm probably going to go out and buy this. It's not one of my collection, but I really enjoyed it. I'm probably going to try and find it on VHS tape to kind of add another level to the ambiance, because it is a fun and silly time, and while your DVD copy was nice, and I did enjoy a few, like, there's not a ton of extras on it, but, like, there was enough to keep me entertained for a minute.
The DVD menu is actually nicely designed.
It is.
It's not the curve of a DVD on the outside, and that's where our menu's at.
Yeah. No, it is a nice DVD, however, like, this is one where, like, it has such an 80s feel to it in the acting and in the styling and the dress and just the portrayal of English at the time, too. Like, it is hitting a very niche styling. And so I'm probably going to try and find this on VHS tape to add to the ambiance. But yeah, I do plan on buying this.
Okay. Even though I do own it, I am in the camp of, say, stream it at least.
Oh, for sure.
It's a fun comedy. It's not my favorite comedy or English comedy or heist movie in general.
Sure.
But it is thoroughly enjoyable. It's one of those ones where, despite it being going on almost 30 years old now.
Yeah.
It's still solid. I
is.
quite like it. And it's one I probably will go back to at some point.
Yeah.
At one point or another, if I'm getting back into English comedies or older English comedies.
And if you need one last reason, this is one of the few movies that can truly say you will die laughing. Because during the initial filming, Ole Betzman, who was a Danish audiologist, laughed so hard that it started up a heart problem for him and he died mid-laugh. And it was a thing that ran headlines, and honestly, that's a great advertisement for this movie.
Yeah, I think Cleese at one point was planning to use it as advertisement, but thought it was in bad taste.
It is, however, that did not stop the newspapers from running it without his permission. I found so many head articles showing off, like, man dies laughing, movie so funny you'll die, like, so many of those were run even without Cleese, like, pushing it out. I will say that Cleese did think about making a second one. I don't know.
No,
I don't think...
There is... It's not a sequel. It's a spiritual sequel where everyone came back for it.
Yeah.
And it's supposedly not as good.
Yeah, that's what I read too. I might check it out just to say that I've, like, experienced the full breadth of what, like, could be, just because I did have a lot of fun with this. No. And I honestly, a lot of the fun I had was specifically Cleese and his gang of misfit funnies. Yeah. So...
No, exactly. I mean, I'll probably start going down a little bit more of his filmography when I have a chance, but... Yeah, no. I mean, it's
a good time.
Yeah, definitely worth at least a watch, so...
I think so, too.
But, anywho, and this has been the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast, MicroViews.
Thanks for listening.
Peace. Thank you for stopping by this here town of the good, the bad, and the weird. We appreciate your listenership, and if you want more of our takes in your life, feel free to check us out on social media at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, or TGTBTW for short. As well, if we missed a fact, your favorite part of a movie, or just have a suggestion and want to reach out and say howdy, feel free to email us at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. And feel free to join our Discord at The Good, the Bad, and the Weird Podcast, where we talk about movies, just share random banter here and there. And always, check out our podcasters, streamers, or any other content creator we shout out in our episodes. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for listening. Peace.